Today's lesson is day 12, you guys. Find your packets. We're almost at the end. I'm going to show you a couple more things to do. They're called sum and difference of cubes. Find day 12. I'm on unit 5. First, I want to review what we learned last week because these are going to look really similar. You'll notice last week what I taught you is what are we supposed to do when we see two things? Here's a term, here's a term. There's two there. Here's a term, here's a term. There's two there. Here's a term, here's a term. There's two there. And I don't want you to get these confused with what we're going to do today, okay, because they're a little bit different. Remember what we did yesterday, or last week, I guess? We square rooted both of these things. And when we wrote our parentheses, we had one parentheses with a minus sign, and we had another parentheses with a plus sign, right? And so then we took the square root of x squared, which just turns into x and x. And then we took the square root of 9, and that just gives you 3 and 3. And this was our final answer. Remember how to do those? We talked about that last week, so I just wanted to review. Again, for this one, I see two things. I'm going to square root, and I'm going to write my answer in parentheses. One of them is going to have a minus, and one of them is going to have a plus. Again, this is review. The square root of 16 is 4, and keep the x with it. The square root of x squared is just x. So I'm going to put 4x and 4x. And you got to keep them together because they're together and they're in the first spot out of these two things. So they go first. That doesn't really look like a 4. Let me change that. There we go. Square root of 25 is 5. And so there's going to be our final answer for that one. One more. I'm going to, again, I see two things. I'm going to square root. I'm going to have two different parentheses, one of them with a minus, one of them with a plus. When I square root 4x squared, I square root 4, I get 2, and keep the x with it. And don't forget about the 1. When you square root 1, you just get 1. So there's our answer for that one. That's a review. That's how to do squares. This is called difference of squares. And why is it called squares? Because this is squared, and this is a number squared. And remember, difference, these have to be minus. If you see any that have a plus, like this one, you can't do it, right? So keep that in mind. That's stuff that we learned last week. I don't want you to get that confused with what we're going to learn this week. This is sum and difference of cubes. So not squares, but cubes. So you're going to see a lot of 3s. Did you know that 2 times 2 times 2 is 8? Therefore, I can take the cube root of 8. That means uncube it, and you get 2. And same thing for 27. Did you know 3 times 3 times 3 is 27? That means I can take the cube root of 27 and get 3. When I take the cube root of x cubed, I just get x. When I take the cubed root of 8x to the third, keep them together, the 8 turns into a 2, and the x cubed turns into an x. I do have a formula here, but I just want to show you how we're going to attack these. I want you to take this first one. And again, let's not get this confused. I see two things here. I also saw two things up here. This is a square, though. This is a cube, so this is going to be different. We are still going to have two parentheses, but one of them is going to be little and one of them is going to be big. Okay? First, I want you to figure out how to uncube these things. You get x times x times x. That's what x to the third is. And 64, can you take a guess? If you're not sure what it is, grab your calculator. You might be thinking 8. 8 times 8 is 64, but that's not a group of 3. 64 is actually 4 times 4 times 4. And I'm going to keep a times in the middle here. So I've uncubed this number, and I've uncubed this number. And here's how I'm going to write my answer. I'm going to have one little parentheses and one big one. And I need to talk about the signs. The same sign as in the problem goes first. The opposite sign as in the problem goes next. And the last sign that goes here is always positive. So let me rewrite this here, the signs. You're going to use this acronym, SOAP. The S stands for the same sign. The O stands for the opposite sign. And this one is always positive. That is what SOAP stands for. So I'm just trying to get organized and like line up what I'm going to write, how I'm going to write my answer. So I uncubed this, I got x, x, x. I uncubed this, I got 4, 4, 4. And I set up my parentheses, a little one and a big one. The same sign goes first. That's what the S stands for. The opposite sign goes next. That's what the O stands for. And the last sign is always positive. Every time this is going to be a plus. Okay, now I'm going to erase all this blue stuff just so I have some room. I'm going to leave that up there. So what goes first? In this spot is just the X. And in this spot is just the 4. So it's the two numbers that were uncubed. Okay. And now here's what we're going to do. This is the cool part. Now I'm going to buddy these up. X times X goes here. X times 4, I'll write it as 4X, goes next. And 4 times 4 goes here, which is 16. And that is my final answer. I know that was kind of a lot. Let me do a few more so that you kind of get the hang of it. That was a lot. We got to practice these. Here's another example. Again, I see two things, but it's not a squares like these. This is squared. 16 is 4 squared. 25 is 5 squared. Those are squares. These are cubes. Okay? So I'm going to uncube them. 8 uncubed is 2, and keep the X with it. And 1 uncubed is 1 times 1 times 1. So uncube it first. That is step number 1. Next, I'm going to set up my parentheses. I have a little one and I have a big one. And let me figure out what the signs are going to be. The same sign in the parentheses goes first. So I'm going to put a plus here. The opposite sign of this goes next. So the next sign is minus. And do you remember what the last sign is? What does the AP stand for? Always positive. The last sign is always positive. So that goes here. Now let's see if we can fill in our holes. The uncubed stuff, so just the 2x and the 1 go first. 2x goes here, 1 goes here. And now I'm going to buddy these up. These go first. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 1 is 2x. And 1 times 1 is 1. And that's how we're going to write our final answer. Okay, let me try just a couple more. What do you do if the sign is not a plus sign? Remember with cubes, this one up here, we couldn't do it because it was a plus sign. This is only difference of squares. So for squares, it has to be a minus sign. That's actually not true for cubes. Okay, we'll write all of this on our note card and we'll get everybody ready. But what do you do if it's a minus sign? We did a couple plus signs up here, so I'm going to do a couple minuses now. It's going to work the exact same way. I have to first uncube these numbers. X times X times X is how you get X to the third. And then when you uncube 8, you get 2 times 2 times 2. If you're not sure how to uncube 8, just grab a calculator and start trying numbers. 2 times 2 times 2, 3 times 2 times 3, 4 times 4 times 4. You'll figure it out eventually. I'm going to set up my parentheses, a little one and a big one. The same sign goes first, so that's going to be a minus. The opposite sign of this goes next, so that's going to be a plus. And the last sign, no matter what, is always positive. That is what SOAP stands for. The same sign goes first. The opposite sign goes next. And then the last sign is always positive. That's what AP stands for. So the uncubed stuff is what we put in first. So the X and the 2, that's what goes first in the little parentheses. And then I'm going to buddy these up. X times X is X squared. X times 2 is 2X. And 2 times 2 is 4. And that is going to be our answer for that one. I'm going to do one more. You guys are doing great. And then I'll just have you try a couple on your own. Love you guys. How about we uncube this stuff? When I uncube 8 and X to the third, I get 2X and 2X and 2X. When I uncube 27, do you know what that number is? 3 times 3 times 3 is 27, and there's a y there, so I'm going to put 3y and 3y and 3y. So you probably know where I got the 2. The 8 turns into a 2, but the x cubed turns into an x. Next, I have to deal with this whole thing. 27 turns into 3, and there's a y there, so y, y, y. Now I'm going to set up my parentheses. Almost done, you guys. The same sign in the problem goes first. The opposite sign of this goes next. And the last sign is always positive every single time. So the uncubed stuff goes in these first two spots. I'm going to put 2x and I'm going to put 3y. And now I just have to buddy these up. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 3y, well, 2 times 3 is 6, and there's an x, and there's a y. It looks kind of weird, but that is how we do it. And 3y times 3y is 9y squared. And that is how we're going to write our final answer. Okay? So that's a reason why I didn't want you to get confused with the difference of squares that we did up here. Those are a lot simpler. Remember, you just square root them, and one of your parentheses has a minus, and one of your parentheses has a plus. And just remember that it has to be a difference. These have to be minus signs to do squares. However, for cubes, there's like a lot more going on, right? You have to first uncube your numbers, and then you have to figure out your parentheses, and your signs follow the SOAP, SOAP acronym. The same sign in the problem goes first, the opposite sign in the problem goes next, and the last sign every time, if you notice, is always positive. And then you just uncube your numbers and fill in your blanks. So I want you to try a couple on the back. You guys can do it. I'm going to walk around and help you, and I will answer all your questions as soon as you ask, okay? Love you guys. Thanks for watching.